This is Grundy, Virginia. Just 20 years ago it was a thriving coal town with good jobs, full stores, and a future. Today half the storefronts are boarded up, the hospital closed, and young people are fleeing as fast as they can. At first glance this looks like just another sad story about economic decline, but it's part of something much, much bigger. For decades America's greatest strength has been its heartland, small towns and rural communities that fed the nation, powered its industries, and sent their sons and daughters to defend it. But now something unprecedented is happening. These places aren't just declining, they're disappearing. Over 46 million Americans live in rural counties that are losing population, losing businesses, and losing hope. One after another these communities are entering what economists call a death spiral, and once it starts almost nothing can stop it. That may sound alarmist but not to the families watching it happen, because across thousands of towns from Appalachia to the Great Plains, from the Rust Belt to the Mississippi Delta, the same pattern is repeating itself. The factory closes, the young people leave, the tax base collapses, services disappear. And what's left behind isn't just economic decline, it's social disintegration. This is Grundy, Virginia, and this is every rural county in America that's lost population since 2010. Last year more than 1,300 counties, nearly half of all U.S. counties, saw their populations shrink, and most of them have been bleeding residents for years. These aren't just statistics, they're obituaries for the American dream. But this is just the beginning, because rural America isn't just losing people, it's losing everything that makes a community function. Over the past decade more than 180 rural hospitals have closed their doors, that's nearly 1 in 10. In some counties the nearest emergency room is now over 100 miles away. If you have a heart attack or a serious accident you might not make it. And if current trends continue, hundreds more rural hospitals could be at risk of closure in the next 5 years. The healthcare crisis is only part of the story. Rural America is also losing its schools. Since 2010 more than 1,200 rural schools have closed, forcing children onto buses for hours each day or leaving districts so understaffed that one teacher covers multiple grades. Then there's infrastructure. Nearly 70% of rural roads are in poor condition. High-speed internet? Forget it, millions of rural Americans still can't get reliable broadband, cutting them off from remote work, online education, and the modern economy. And banking? Over 6,000 bank branches have closed in rural areas since 2009. Now families drive 30 miles to deposit a check or apply for a loan, if they can get one at all. But amongst all these problems, rural America's biggest headache has been economic opportunity, or rather the complete lack of it. From keeping young people at home to maintaining basic services, economic decline has been the ball and chain holding rural America down. The numbers tell a devastating story. The median household income in rural America is around $52,000, nearly $20,000 less than in urban areas. Poverty rates are higher, job growth is slower, and the jobs that do exist often pay poverty wages with no benefits. Manufacturing, once the backbone of small-town prosperity, has been gutted. Since 2000 America has lost over 5 million manufacturing jobs, and many of those losses hit rural areas the hardest. Towns that were built around a single factory or mill watched their entire economy collapse when production moved overseas or to Mexico. Agriculture, the other pillar of rural America, isn't much better. Small family farms are going extinct, replaced by massive corporate operations. In 1950 there were 5.6 million farms in America. Today there are just over 2 million, and most of those are struggling. The average farm household now earns more from off-farm jobs than from farming itself. Meanwhile, corporate megafarms are consolidating land, driving up prices, and making it nearly impossible for young people to start farming without inheriting land. Coal mining, timber, oil and gas. The industries that built rural America are all in decline or facing automation that's eliminating jobs faster than new ones can be created. So what's left? Service jobs, retail, fast food, healthcare if the hospital hasn't closed yet. These are jobs that pay $10 to $15 an hour with unpredictable schedules and no path to advancement. You can't raise a family on that, you can't buy a home, you can't build a future. That's why young people are leaving, and once they leave they rarely come back. This exodus creates a vicious cycle. When educated young workers leave, businesses can't find qualified employees. When businesses can't find workers, they close or never open in the first place. When businesses close, tax revenues fall. When tax revenues fall, schools and services get cut. When schools and services get cut, more families leave and the cycle accelerates. Some towns have tried to fight back. They've offered tax incentives, built new infrastructure, invested in downtown revitalization. A few have succeeded, usually those with natural beauty that can attract tourists or remote workers. But for every success story there are dozens of failures because the fundamental economics don't work anymore. Rural areas can't compete with cities on wages, amenities, or opportunities, and in an increasingly digital, educated, service-based economy, location matters more than ever. But economic decline is only half the story. The other half is even more disturbing because when communities lose hope, they don't just decline economically, they disintegrate socially. Rural America is now facing a public health crisis that's unprecedented in modern American history. It's called deaths of despair, and it's killing people at rates not seen in generations. Suicide rates in rural America are nearly double those in urban areas. Drug overdose deaths have skyrocketed. The opioid epidemic hit rural communities harder than anywhere else, flooding towns with prescription painkillers that destroyed families and overwhelmed local law enforcement. Even as the opioid crisis has ebbed in some places, it's been replaced by meth and fentanyl. Alcoholism, obesity, and diabetes are all significantly higher in rural areas. Life expectancy, which had been rising for generations, has actually declined in many rural counties. Think about that. In the richest country in human history, there are places where people are dying younger than their parents did. The social fabric is tearing apart in other ways too. Divorce rates are higher, church attendance, once the glue that held rural communities together, is declining. Volunteer organizations from the Lions Club to the local fire department can't find enough members. Social isolation is epidemic, especially among the elderly who stayed behind when their children moved away. Crime, particularly property crime and domestic violence, has increased in many rural areas. But with shrinking tax bases, counties can't afford enough police officers or deputies. In some places there might be one or two officers covering hundreds of square miles. Response times can be an hour or more. People are on their own, and increasingly they're angry. This anger isn't abstract, it's reshaping American politics. Rural voters feeling abandoned by both political parties and the broader economy have become frustrated. They've watched factories close while politicians promised solutions that never came. They've seen their communities decay while cities prospered. They've been told to learn to code or just move, as if abandoning everything they know is simple. The political consequences have been profound. Rural America has shifted dramatically in recent elections, not just because of ideology but because of economic desperation. Desperation over jobs that disappeared, desperation over communities that are dying, desperation over a future that looks increasingly bleak. This desperation helped reshape American politics over the past decade, and it continues to drive political division today. But here's what's truly disturbing: despite all the political attention, despite all the promises from both parties, nothing has fundamentally changed. If anything, things have gotten worse because the forces destroying rural America aren't simple to fix, they're structural, they're global, and they're accelerating. Automation is eliminating the few good jobs that remain. AI and robotics will hit routine manual labor next. The shift to renewable energy is devastating coal country. E-commerce is killing small-town retail. Telemedicine might help with healthcare access, but it also means fewer local jobs. Every trend in the modern economy works against rural communities. Some experts argue we should just accept this reality. They say it's economically inefficient to keep subsidizing small towns that aren't viable anymore. They argue that concentrating population in cities is more productive, more sustainable, and inevitable. Let rural America fade away, help people relocate, and move on. But this isn't just about economics, it's about culture, identity, and what kind of country America wants to be. Rural communities aren't just geographic locations, they're where food is grown, where natural resources are extracted, where American identity was forged. These are the places that sent disproportionate numbers of their children to fight in every American war. These are communities with deep roots, strong traditions, and a way of life that millions of Americans still cherish. Abandoning them isn't just an economic decision, it's a moral one. And there are real consequences to letting rural America die. When a significant portion of the country feels left behind, democracy becomes strained. When geographic inequality becomes extreme, national unity fractures. When entire regions are written off as economically unproductive, resentment festers and divisions deepen. We're already seeing this. Urban and rural America might as well be different countries now, with different economies, different cultures, different values, and increasingly different perspectives on reality itself. So what can be done? The truth is, there's no simple solution. No single policy will reverse decades of decline. But there are things that could help. Massive investment in rural broadband could enable remote work and online businesses. Healthcare reform could prevent rural hospital closures. Student loan forgiveness tied to rural service could bring doctors, teachers, and professionals to underserved areas. Tax incentives could encourage businesses to locate in struggling regions. Some experts advocate for a modern Homestead Act, offering support to young people willing to move to depopulated areas and start businesses or farms. Others suggest expanded safety net programs to provide stability in places where traditional employment has disappeared. Still others argue for breaking up corporate agriculture and supporting family farming, or investing in new industries like renewable energy manufacturing and transition communities. But all of these solutions require something America has struggled to achieve: sustained political will and significant public investment. And even with that, success isn't guaranteed, because the forces reshaping the economy, technology, globalization, urbanization, are powerful and likely irreversible. What's clear is that the current path is unsustainable. You cannot have a functioning democracy when large parts of the country are thriving while others are in desperate decline. You cannot maintain national unity when geographic inequality becomes this extreme. And you cannot preserve the American social fabric when entire communities that helped build this nation are disappearing. The crisis in rural America isn't just an economic problem, it's a challenge to the American experiment itself, because if the United States can't find a way to provide opportunity, dignity, and hope to all its citizens regardless of where they live, then the divisions tearing the country apart will only deepen. And in a nation as diverse, as armed, and as politically polarized as America has become, those divisions threaten the very foundation of what holds the country together. The question isn't whether rural America is in crisis, it clearly is. The question is whether anyone with the power to address it actually will, because the clock is ticking, the trends are accelerating, and for 46 million Americans living in places like Grundy, Virginia, watching their communities slowly die, time is running out. What happens next won't just determine the fate of rural America, it will determine what kind of country the United States becomes in the 21st century.